Okay, folks, I am going to start this webinar. Welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. My name is Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the QEM Heroes Initiative. The Heroes program brings together experienced researchers who have worked in federal agencies to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. Our goal is to build sustainable ecosystems for STEM research and education at colleges and universities across the country, not just at those with large funding portfolios. We hope this series promotes engagement with our Heroes Fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. During the webinar, please use the Q&A tool to ask questions of the panelists. The panelists and moderators will monitor and answer questions during the webinar as time allows. Once the presentation is over, we will moderate a discussion and give attendees the opportunity to raise their hands and ask questions live. And I wanted to remind everyone, if you've been to a webinar before, you'll know that you will receive access to the recording of this presentation by membership in the QEM network. You will automatically be registered as a QEM network member and receive access to the QEM Resource Hub, where you can find the recording of this presentation. And I'm happy to introduce our presenter today. Dr. Emily Davis served as a program manager in the Office of Training and Education at the National Cancer Institute within the National Institutes of Health, where she oversaw competitive fellowship programs and led professional development workshops. She received her doctorate in biomedical sciences from UCSF, where her research focused on the role of the second X chromosome in brain aging and neurodegeneration. So without further ado, I am going to turn the floor over to Emily.
All right, just one final check. Can everyone see my slides? Great. All right. Thank you all. Thank you so much for that introduction, Christine. And thank you all for joining today. With that, I'm going to go over some Zoom webinar housekeeping. This honestly is mostly things that Christine has already covered. But for those who may be joining a little bit late, I'm going to do it anyway. First off, I just want to start with a disclaimer. So any views that are expressed during this webinar are my own and are based on my own personal experience. They do not in any way represent the federal government, QEM, or anyone other than myself. The other thing I want to mention is that, as Christine said, the slides and resources are going to be available for this presentation on the QEM Network Resource Hub. If you've registered for this webinar, you've already been added to the network, and so you will definitely have access to the slides within the next few days. If it's not apparent, this webinar is being recorded. The recording will also be made available on the QEM Resource Hub. Closed captioning is also available using Zoom. You should be able to navigate to it using the More on your personal page. And please don't hesitate to reach out to Dr. Christine Wood or Tarina Whitfield, Tarina Whitfield, if you have any trouble doing this. I will probably be taking questions during the presentation, but if you have questions as they come up, please put them in the Q&A section. There will be times during this webinar where I'll be asking folks to put things in the chat. So if you want to guarantee that your question gets answered, please use the Q&A function. And last but not least, there will be a post-webinar survey. So please complete it so that then I have a better sense of what didn't work and how we can better serve this community. And with that, let's get into our first poll. I just want to get a sense of kind of who we have joining us today. I'd like to know kind of what your career stage is and what is the likelihood that you'll be designing a training or professional development webinar within the next year. Christine, I'm assuming you're monitoring. Let me know when, we've got the majority of folks responding so we can see the results.
We've still got folks responding actively, so I will let this
Nice.
go
Yeah,
for a
no,
few
take
seconds.
take your time.
All right, looks like there's a lull in responses, so I'm going to share the results of this poll.
All right. Nice. So it looks like over half of you are faculty. Got about a quarter of you that are college admin or staff, and then the rest of you are fellow QEM Heroes Fellows. So that's good to know. Awesome. And then it also looks like, yes, so basically all of you are very likely or likely to be giving a training or professional development workshop in the next year. Okay, so that's good to know, and I'll keep that in mind as I discuss kind of the tips and tricks we'll be going over. So I also just want to do some level setting and quickly describe how I'll be using some of the terms during this presentation. When I talk about training, I'm usually talking about sessions that focus on skills or knowledge that participants are going to be expected to use in their current job and implement immediately. So examples of this are things like sexual harassment training, biosafety training, the kind of trainings that folks would be required to do during their onboarding. When I talk about professional development, I'm talking more about long-term sustainable skills and techniques. So think of things like grant writing skills, research presentation skills, professional networking skills, things along those lines. And when I'm talking about a workshop, usually I'm going to be referring to things that are much longer than a 1 hour lunch and learn, like what this is, or a webinar. So this is something that typically involves multiple sessions, and typically you're working with the same cohort of people. As a general rule of thumb, if it's less than 3 hours long, it's probably more of a webinar or a training than a workshop. And for all of these, they may or may not be optional. So whether or not your workshop is optional can make a huge difference, both on kind of the audience that you'll be working with, as well as things like group dynamics and kind of the engagement level that folks are coming in with, which we'll talk about a little more later. So what I'm hoping to do today is model a better approach to running some of these workshops. And we'll start by kind of providing some guiding principles to keep in mind when you're designing your workshops. So to that end, I've got a couple learning objectives here. So I'm hoping by the end of this webinar, you'll be able to summarize these guiding design principles for creating engaging training and professional development workshops, as well as apply these design principles to construct a simple training or professional development workshop outline that aligns both your learning objectives along with your content, activities, and assessment tools. So let's get into what these design principles are. So I'm going to be focusing on kind of 3 design principles that have helped me when developing an engaging workshop. First and foremost is starting with outcomes, not content, fostering a learning environment, and building in application and assessment. So let's go through each of these guiding principles and talk a little bit more about what they are in detail. Now, oftentimes when we put together a workshop, we're often thinking about the resources that we want to share. We think about all the information that we're hoping to convey. You may have some overarching learning objectives or outcomes, but they can sometimes be an afterthought or something that comes from the content that you're hoping to put in rather than vice versa. Whereas I recommend starting with those outcomes. By starting with the outcomes, it kind of gives you a guiding light when putting together your activities and assessments. It really kind of helps guide that. It helps you kind of narrow things down and what you want to like really focus your time on. And throughout the development of your workshop, as you're developing content and activities and assessment tools, you can be asking yourself, does this address my outcome? And as a general rule of thumb, you don't want to really have more than 2 or 3 outcomes or learning objectives for your 60-minute workshop. If you have more than that, then you're almost certainly going to run out of time before you're able to cover everything or leave folks overwhelmed. And when people are overwhelmed, they tend to disengage and struggle to learn effectively. So some other things to keep in mind when developing your outcomes is knowing your audience and your topic. These are kind of the most important things. So knowing kind of the career stage of your audience and what the topic and workshop is will help you kind of focus in on what you should be having as a learning outcome. Another thing to consider is the delivery system. So for example, giving a workshop online, such as over like a Zoom platform versus doing it in person, as well as if you're providing workshops synchronously, so at the same time versus asynchronously, like if it's a workshop that folks will be watching, before a discussion or something like that. Because that will also impact kind of what you're able to do in the time that you're given. Another thing about the time that you're given is the schedule for these workshops. So what are you going to be able to accomplish in the given time? What is realistic? If you're working with folks for a 3 hour, big time lot for your workshop versus if you're doing multiple, sessions over the course of months, right? Like what you're able to convey to folks and what folks are able to do in the time will vary wildly. And finally, as I referenced a little earlier in this talk, whether or not your workshop is required will have an impact. You'll need to take into account things like kind of where your audience, meeting your audience where they're at. If they're doing this because it's required, they're going to be coming in with a different mindset and may engage differently than if you're coming in with an audience, such as you lovely folks who have all chosen to be here. So with that, I want to take some of these circumstances and the things we've discussed and give you a chance to write or rewrite a learning outcome for either the workshop that you're planning or a workshop that you've previously attended. It sounds like most of you are planning a workshop within the next year. So I highly recommend using this time to start, thinking about what those outcomes might be. Remember to be SMART. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with SMART goals. So when you're thinking about your outcome, have it be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, and try to keep it simple. To kind of maybe help some of the creative juices flowing, I want to give a quick example. So here as an example, participants will learn about effective communication. It's arguably specific. It's not really measurable. It's arguably achievable and timely, but a better way and a much more specific and measurable way to put it would be something like participants will practice active learning and effective verbal and nonverbal communication strategies in a professional setting. All right. So I've given you an example. I've given you some tools to work with. I'm going to give you all some time to work on your learning outcome. And if anyone would be willing to put what they've come up with either in the chat or after a minute, we can also see if anyone would be willing to come on the mic. All right, I see we've got an example from Jessica. By the end of this workshop, participants will be faculty in this case, will identify 3 student test-taking strategies they'll implement in the course during their upcoming semester. Awesome. I love that one. We've got from Evangeline, I'm doing a faculty mentoring workshop. Oh, awesome. I've done faculty mentoring workshops. We should talk sometime. Trying to make it not about me or what to do, but deciding what they as a group want to do. So outcomes like a list of mentoring skills or procedures recommended for the center of mentors, center focused list of how senior personnel want to see professional development for mentees shaped, That makes sense, especially because it sounds like this would be a facilitated workshop where you're really leveraging the expertise of your faculty. Um, Karen, participants will learn 4 effective communication strategies, which are appropriate for the workplace environment. These are great. Does anyone want to come off of mic or come onto mic and come off mute, share their learning objective? No worries if not.
You've got one new one in the chat.
Oh, yes. Patience. Participants will demonstrate effective communication strategies and demonstrate nonverbal and verbal communication. It's very similar to the example I gave. That's great. I'm glad that you're going to be giving a presentation on communication strategies because that's really crucial in kind of all areas of life. All right. So with that, oh, okay. No worry. Okay, so it sounds like you don't have access to mic and video functions. Okay, so
If you raise your hand, we'll open the mic for you. You have to raise your hand to get mic access.
Thank you, Tarina. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully there'll be other opportunities for folks to come off and let us know what they're thinking. So now, did I struggle to follow my own advice when developing webinars? Absolutely, which is why I highly recommend the concept of a idea parking lot. So some of you may be familiar with this in the context of meetings and keeping meetings on track. It's basically a way, to put any ideas, resources, content, just things that you think of that either don't fit into the time, don't align well with your learning objectives, and otherwise are just something that you think is a really great idea, but just isn't feasible for the workshop you're developing. And the nice thing about sticking it in idea parking lot is it's a way to kind of put it aside, it's still there. It could turn into a future workshop. It could turn into a discussion that you have as a follow-up discussion with folks. It could turn to a future activity or even just like a handout or other resource that has that information on it. And there are a lot of different ways that this idea parking lot can look. So for me, it's usually just like a blank Word doc. It could be something like a notebook or another notes app. It could be an Excel spreadsheet for folks who are more visual. It could be a whiteboard or a blank presentation slide. However your mind works, basically just, creating this place of like, well, I know, if I'm having a trouble, putting this idea to rest, or I don't think it's going to fit in, you can put in the idea parking lot. And sometimes you might even go back and say, actually, this does align well with this outcome, so I'm going to add this back in. All right, and with that, let's move on to our second guiding principle, which is fostering a learning environment. So let's talk about how we can do that. So 2 big components of fostering a learning environment are psychological safety and active participation. People just are going to be more engaged if they feel safe to speak and they feel included. And engagement both improves learning as well as enriching the learning environment for others. And active participation also just helps folks engage and learn by thinking, doing, explaining. So how can we accomplish this? Well, a big component of cultivating psychological safety is to build trust. And one big way to build trust is, especially in the context of a training or professional development workshop, is providing low-risk participation opportunities. So these are things like putting something in the chat or completing a poll or giving folks time for just kind of quiet reflection. Things that are fairly low lift and folks don't necessarily feel intimidated, like if you're asking them to stand up in front of everyone and tell them, their thoughts. I also encourage you to normalize wrong answers. If you make it so that way, there is, I always think there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. You want folks to be saying things that maybe, help you gauge their understanding and can be an opportunity for the group to learn together, as well as just overall enrich the discussion and encourage folks who might otherwise be hesitant to give a response because they're worried that they'll look foolish. With that in mind, I also highly encourage you to thank folks for sharing. It's a really small courtesy, and it just kind of conveys that you're appreciative of the contributions that they've made. Another way to kind of create a trusting and space for folks to share within the learning environment is to make things accessible. And you can do that with things like having small groups or independent exercises before a large group discussion, basically giving folks some time to kind of warm up to the idea, as well as folks who may be a bit more introverted allows them to also contribute. This is also why, making use of the chat function in a virtual setting can be really helpful. Similarly, you can provide prompts ahead of time. So if you know who your audience and your cohort's going to be, providing this ahead of time, especially if you want folks to come to the workshop ready to discuss ideas or have questions, it gives them more time to kind of think about, what you're going to be reviewing. The other thing is, especially in, highly interactive environments, you want folks to set some ground rules. And usually I like to do this with everyone during like the first workshop, just kind of to establish the norms of how folks should be conducting themselves and engaging, and things like, like not passing judgment, maintaining privacy, and just kind of outlining behaviors that maybe aren't acceptable, like name calling or making jokes at someone else's expense. Now, some ways to encourage active participation. So similar to kind of what I was saying earlier about providing low risk participation is I suggest always starting with some kind of icebreaker. This gives you a way to immediately start with something that's engaging. It kind of sets the tone that this is going to be a participatory workshop. It also gives you a sense of who your audience is. So again, I know that the majority of you are faculty. And overall, again, just kind of helps you engage with your audience and understand kind of where they're coming in at, what maybe their energy level's like. In addition to asking things like folks, identifying themselves, maybe sharing their affiliation. You could also have folks share a current challenge that's related to the topic. So in the example I think someone gave with like mentorship, like what's a mentoring issue that you've recently encountered or that you've been struggling with, as a way to kind of encourage engagement and promote this learning environment. You can also just provide a question or relevant real world problem for folks to respond to, or just do kind of a quick poll. And we'll get into some more ideas of activity, but really you want to minimize the amount of time that you have passive content or lecturing. I would say try to avoid ever going over 10 minutes of just you talking. And always try to follow up anything that you're talking about with a relevant activity, which will tie back in to our third design principle. If possible, try to incorporate things like movement, moments of silence, images and graphics. These are things that just kind of add texture and variety to the workshop and help folks engage by just giving them a break, either visually, physically, or mentally. Another recommendation is, especially if you're going to be working with the same cohort of folks over multiple sessions, is providing them with a choice. So if there are multiple activities that address your learning objective, you can let the group decide based on, their energy level or what they're most excited about, what they want, how they want to engage with that particular topic. So for example, you could offer either, to go through a specific case study for folks to respond to, or do like a breakout room role play that both, address the topic. And finally, another kind of rule of thumb is if you're having any kind of presentation that's going over 60 minutes, provide at least 5 minutes of breaks. Folks need time to decompress. They need time to digest the information. And honestly, we all just need some time to take care of our basic biological needs. So, on the subject of providing relevant activities, what are some kind of ways to do that? An exercise that I think is really helpful is replacing content with an activity. So start by, going through either your slides, your outline, your learning outcome, and asking yourself, how can I address this specifically with an activity? So you consider things like small group breakout rooms, or think, pair, share, a role-playing or simulation activity, case studies, or a problem-solving task. a live poll or quiz, leveraging internal expertise. So I think someone was mentioning earlier, you've got mentors who are coming in with, years of experience that you could leverage, having them explain concepts or do kind of like a teach back moment over a topic that maybe you covered in a previous session. Also making use of things like whiteboards or sticky notes or flip charts or something that, both gets people maybe up and moving around as well as sharing their ideas related to an activity. So to give kind of example of this, so this is a slide taken from presentations I've given to community college students and post-baccalaureate fellows before. It's pretty straightforward content slide that just goes over some basic strategies for finding someone on LinkedIn for an informational interview. And not to toot my own horn, but I don't think it's a bad slide, but I think it could be better. And I think I could replace it with a live demonstration and practice time. So rather than just telling them how to use this function on LinkedIn, have them actually see it done in action and give them the opportunity to do it themselves. This is both much more engaging and it also increases the chance that they'll do the behavior that I'm trying to encourage, and it could prompt them to bring up any issues or questions that they have related to this topic. So thinking, kind of taking a moment for some meta reflection, which of the following things have we done during this webinar that has helped you feel engaged? And if you haven't felt engaged, that's also important. I would like to know that. Don't hesitate. I can take the criticism. All right. Yep, so folks have highlighted, we've been doing a couple polls. Some of you have been observing quietly but feel included. That's good. All right, I'm glad to know that you're making me feel, you're feeling like I'm facilitating this with encouragement and acknowledgement. And over a third, or about a third of you are sharing ideas in the chat. Great. And there's one of you who has not felt engaged, which, I'll take it. And if, again, at the end of this, there will be a survey. So please let me know if you're able to, like, why you felt disengaged from this. If there's something that, you would have felt as more engaging. It's more engaging. All right, so let's go into our third and final principle, which is building in application and assessment. So effective workshops include time for practice, reflection, and application. Engagement drops if the content feels kind of generic or irrelevant, especially when it comes to training and professional development type workshops. You want folks using the tools and resources that you're sharing. And sometimes when you just discuss a thing, it's not going to automatically transfer to an application. So one of the things that I always encourage is you want to make sure that folks are leaving with some next steps or some resources so they can continue their learning journey. So I hope throughout this webinar, you're leaving with some, ideas, and we'll share some resources at the end as well to help you continue to develop engaging workshops. Another thing to do is to use contextually appropriate real examples. So highlight where these things can be applied to and are relevant to your audience. So again, the fact that many of you are faculty and are going to be giving professional development webinars, either it sounds like primarily to other faculty, trying to use real world examples. So example, drawing on that mentorship workshop. You can also go a step further and invite folks to apply ideas throughout the workshop, or sometimes if you have multiple sessions, you can ask them as kind of, a light homework thing to apply the ideas between sessions. When possible, I also highly recommend giving opportunities for folks to provide feedback, especially if they can provide real-time feedback. This information is crucial to you as a presenter and facilitator because it helps you adapt to your audience, as well as providing data that lets you move beyond just kind of using attendance as a metric for success. And these don't need to be in-depth, robust, IRB approved survey tools. They can be, simple, and honestly should probably be short and sweet. So things like feedback surveys, reflection prompts, that sort of thing. There's also the opportunity for follow-up activities. So things like assignments between or surveys that are sent out afterwards. I'm also a big proponent for sustained impact. Things like creating a community of practice at the end of the workshop, especially if your workshop series is long enough that the cohorts kind of gotten to know each other. Creating, either a post-workshop resource sharing or, maybe even, a whiteboard or something that folks can contribute to. And just other kind of follow-ups or check-ins with folks, even something as simple as, emailing participants, a month afterwards and just asking like, hey, have you had, a chance to implement any of these things? Are there any questions that you found like while trying to implement these things? Something that just kind of gives you additional touch points to check in with your participants and see how they're learning and how your workshop went as far as its ability to keep folks engaged in learning. So, as a final point on building application and building time for reflection, reflection prompts information retention and can also help you highlight gaps in understanding. Also, in general, it's just a great way for folks to leave feeling positively since it gives them an opportunity to highlight for themselves the value of the workshop. So again, similar to feedback, these can be really light lift things. They don't need to be anything super in depth. Something as simple as giving them, an open-ended thing like a 1-minute reflection time. You could give them more specific prompts like, a challenge, like what's one thing that you'll try within the next week? What's a key takeaway that you have? And on that note, let's give you all some time to reflect. So thinking through what we've covered in today's webinar, how far along on the readiness ruler? So if we have this ruler here, how far along do you feel ready to implement one or more of these guiding principles? Do you feel like you measure up? If you had to measure your overall readiness, where do you think you would fall along this ruler? So you'll have an opportunity to put in a numerical value. I'd also like you all to make a commitment. There'll be, it'll be accessible in the poll. I'm also happy for you all to share it in the chat as well. One thing that you'll be doing differently in your next workshop. Okay. Looks like as far as the results, it's just letting me know the total percentage of all of you who have answered. It's like 96% of you answered, so that's great. I'll be sure to look over where you all measured, or if you want to share in the chat kind of how confident you're feeling, or again want to share what your commitment is. And with that, I want to leave you all with some available resources. These are resources that I've used when developing workshops before. So one, again, want to give a huge plug to the QEM Resource Hub. Again, you are all now part of the QEM network, and so you'll have access to this Resource Hub where there's a ton of, previously held workshops and information that you can find. Another one is the Center for Improvement of Mentored Experiences and Research, also known as CIMR. This is out of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they have especially, they have a lot of things again about their course Entering Mentoring. They have things on facilitation and working with undergraduate versus graduate students versus clinical fellows. So I think that's a great resource. There's also the Professional Development Hub, Innovations in Graduate Education Hub. All of these hubs have a plethora of information available to you that can help enrich your next workshop. I also highly encourage you to take advantage of the tools that you're given. So again, if you're doing a virtual webinar, taking advantage of Zoom polls and quizzes and Q&As and chats and things. Also, there are things like Padlet, Menti, Slido. These are all ways to incorporate interactivity within your presentations. And I have one final question for you all, which is there a relevant resource that I didn't mention that you have found useful and why? And let's crowdsource this. I think, and the other thing too, so we're going to be saving the chat. So anything that you share in here, I'm going to be adding it to the slide, or if I get, a ton of resources, I'll make a separate document for it. But if there's something that you found useful that you'd be willing to share with your colleagues, I always think more resources, the better. Tracy says similar ones is demonstrated here. Yeah. Was there a particular one that you found useful, or that you would be your favorite or kind of go-to, Tracy?
The one above it
Padlet.
says Menti.
Menti, yeah. So we got, yeah. And the other thing is I'm pretty sure for all of these, there should be a free version. Some of them also have paid versions, depending on your college or university, they might have a license for it, or sometimes your department that you can check, which will give you just more functionality. But honestly, the base functionality for a lot of these will cover the majority of what you'd want to do. Someone mentions microboards or Sigma, the SEER Institute, and the CIRTL at UW-Madison. Figma, not Sigma. Got it. Figma. Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I've heard of Miro and I've used Miro boards before, but I haven't heard of Figma. I'll have to check that one out. Cool. Yeah, this is great. And yeah, keep them coming. But with that, I just want to thank you all for your time and attention. So again, my name is Dr. Emily Davis. Feel free to reach out to me. My QEM email is listed here. As is true for all of the Heroes Fellows, like we are here to serve as a resource for you. So you can schedule one-on-one meetings with all of us. We all have available office hours. So please, if anything I said was useful or you'd like to follow up with me, I'd be more than happy to discuss any professional development workshop that you'll be putting on and reviewing, anything with you. Happy to talk about, my time at the NIH, what have you. Again, we've got a bunch of QR codes on here. So, QEM, us fellows, we're doing multiple webinars like this every week. So definitely check out the QEM events page to see if there are other upcoming webinars that are relevant, or that you're interested in. You can go to the Heroes webpage, which will give you a list of all of the Heroes Fellows and let you know kind of what our region that we cover is, as well as topic areas that we have expertise in, and how to contact us. And of course, the webinar feedback form. Please let me know how this went, how you felt about it. Dondra says reaction icons and platforms provide a simple response. Yeah, I thought about for this one, like, because I've seen it done before where folks will say, like, kind of what emoji like represents how you're feeling right now. It's always a good one. So you can kind of see how tired folks are. And Figma has response and reaction icons. That's cool.
Emily, we
Yeah.
have someone who's raised their hand and wants to come off mute.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
Rhonda. Hello, Rhonda, you're off mute.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
Oh, that's okay.
All good. All right. Do we have anything in the Q&A?
Oh, Hope just raised her hand, so I will go over to Hope. Hope, you are off mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, actually, I am a new staff member at my higher institution of learning, and this is the first time I have to do a workshop ever.
No
Uh,
pressure.
so I didn't know like how it seems like everybody here has experience in that. I didn't know where everybody started. Like, how did you put together your workshop materials in the beginning at your very first time doing it?
Yeah. And I think that's a great question. I'll be happy to answer for myself, but I'd also would love if other folks who have more experience or have experience with this, like kind of what helped you get started. For me, kind of the two big things was one, just exploring various resource hubs that are already available out there. There's also just a lot of like academic papers and things like that on learning and effective use of workshops and things like that that's available. So one is just kind of, taking a look at what's out there as far as like what are kind of well-trodden or well-known like tips and tricks for creating a workshop. Another one is also just thinking about workshops that you've been in that you thought were effective and thinking about why. Um, and the other thing too is again, like, using those kind of design principles of like starting with your outcome, thinking about what, activities and things. I know on one of these slides I listed a ton of different types of activities and did not go into any detail about what exactly those look like, but I'm happy to discuss them more. But there's a lot of different ways to get started. Does that answer your
Yes,
question?
yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question in the Q&A.
Mhm.
How might you help guide a facilitator to gain trust with a group that they have never met before?
Oh, that is a good question. Um, I think, there's a lot of kind of relationship building that I think can impact this. So if it's a group they've never met before, so if you're guiding the facilitator, I don't know if, if this is relevant to your context, but if it's something where you know the group, but they don't know the facilitator, just, being a bridge between them. So introducing that person, speaking highly of them and kind of encouraging the facilitator, giving them maybe some heads up on like, hey, this is kind of what the group's like, this is their vibe, watch out, this person really likes to talk a lot, so you might want to like give time to other people to say something, that sort of thing. And I think also the facilitator has the opportunity to gain folks' trust by just being, upfront about where they're coming in at. A lot of times, being deferential or using compliments can get you a long way, like letting folks know how excited you are to work with them, what a great group they are, how you're excited to like learn from them. That's that kind of stuff.
And we have a raised hand from Patience. I'm going to give Patience the opportunity to come off of mute. Patience, you are off of mute.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, I just want to respond to Hope,
Yeah.
the first person that asked the question. One thing I want to say to Hope is that you should know that you are the expert of your whatever you are presenting, right? You are the expert of that content, so you have to go on stage and own it. You want to practice, you don't, it doesn't practice. You can practice if you have kids, you can practice with your kids, practice in the mirror, practice how to pronounce the word. You want to make sure that you are able to pronounce every word that you are about to present. And if in the process you make an error, just keep going. Don't say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. When you start doing that, then you start losing confidence. Allow the audience to ask you, what did you just say? Then that will give you enough time to recoup and present what you were saying. And just take your time and just slow down, and you should be able to own that presentation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Patience. And actually, that's relevant to the other question that was in the Q&A, because as advice for a facilitator that's never met a group before is again kind of letting them hyping them up, letting them know that they're the expert in this, even if they've never engaged with this group before. Yeah, thank you so much, Patience.
And I think Rhonda has her hand raised.
Yes, it's raised this time, I promise. One thing that I enjoy doing when I give presentations, I guess slash workshops, to be engaging, to kind of get the audience comfortable. I like to have activities. I like to have activities. I find myself giving certain items away, like playing that tends to kind of mellow the audience out and build that trust with them. So you can go ahead and it just makes the presentation more and I'm very informal. I'm not really a formal presenter, and that kind of helps to guide the room and kind of own the room like it was mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. And would you mind saying a little bit more? Did I don't know if I heard you correctly, but you say kind of giving them something?
I give out, I don't want to say gifts, but I give initiatives
Hmm.
if I start asking questions to say, does anyone know anything about this? And the first person that may answer the question right, I may give them, a pad or something to for getting the answer right, or just being a participant.
Hmm. It's almost like a reward for engaging kind
Yeah,
of
it's a
thing.
it's a reward for their engagement, for
Yeah.
their participation.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got some like, university swag, some
Yeah,
pencils, something,
yeah.
it's great. Oh, it looks like we've got Evangeline in the chat. I think about what people have expressed what they want or need and try to hear that and think about what outcomes represent that. Think about what activities might help them get there and think about how much time those take up. That might help with the question about how to start making a workshop. I genuinely have to write about these things, then draw what I think the slides could look like. I have to time balance and make sure that I present only 20 to 30% of the time and have activities for the remainder. Often delete more than half the slides I have when I time balance. Yeah, so again, like that's why I use that idea of parking lot, because yeah, like the overwhelming majority of things are going to end up getting cut for time and to provide more opportunities for engagement and engaging activities. But I also yeah, I really appreciate your point as well. To basically think through like who your audience is. That kind of gets back at that piece of knowing your audience and like what are the issues that they're facing and what information and what learning objectives are going to be most relevant to them. This is great. Yeah, thank you all so much. We still have 10 minutes.
I said this in the chat, but thank you everyone for your advice. It's very helpful. I appreciate it very much.
Golnaz, you're off mute. I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Wood. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis, because my Wi-Fi up and down, but I listen to you. My question is, what methods do you recommend that will be used to collect participant feedback?
Yeah, so I think in part of that question, there's also the question of are you trying to is this supposed to be like formalized feedback, like a
Yes.
formalized survey, or is this just kind of more informal feedback, like just kind of getting a sense maybe during the workshop kind of where folks
Okay,
are
let
at?
me tell you, because when I look
Yeah.
at your CV, I'm a forensic scientist and I'm a
Mhm.
noise grant. in the NSF. For example, this summer, I'm planning to give the workshop for my potential teachers, students. So for this reason, based on because you are the expert, I'm not, I'm a researcher, scientist. So what do you recommend that for this is when we give the report and after the evaluation, do you recommend it any methods? Hey, goodness, this is the best one. How it can be my workshop is because I spent a lot of money this summer but I need to give the nice report to NSF. Make sense? Dr. Davis,
Yes,
so what is
yes,
your
yes. So this is
recommendation?
right. So what's information that you can provide to NSF? So I will add the caveat that, I don't want to, get up against, your university might have policies around like, getting approval for survey tools or things like that. But I think, so one thing that I know that SIMR encourages is doing kind of a before and after self-assessment. So, at the beginning of the workshop series or before folks join, asking them to kind of put where they feel like their understanding of a topic is. And then at the end of the workshop series, ask them, where they feel they are now and how much they have, and asking them explicitly, like, do you feel like you know more now than you did when you started? Both because folks tend to overestimate how much they know about a topic, and also because then it gives you a nice, a nice point saying, look, like this is, folks have self-assessed that they did get something out of this workshop. Also things like, again, just like general feedback forms on, what people did and didn't enjoy. If you're able to provide like, qualitative information. In addition, you can maybe pull some quotes out for folks who, saying that something was super helpful or, that they felt very positively about the workshop series. And sometimes if you're having folks, create something during the course of the workshop. So if again, maybe you're having folks, develop their curriculum, over the course of the workshop or some other kind of deliverable. You can also potentially include examples of that in your report showing like this is something that someone was able to create as a result of attending this workshop. Those are some things just kind of off the top of my head. I also know we have several Heroes Fellows who were at NSF. And so I also would encourage any of them if, if they're, I don't know exactly what NSF might be looking for in a report from someone who received a grant. So if there's something that you all think would be really useful to include, please either, come off of mute or put it in the chat.
So, Dr. Davis, noted whatever your suggestion. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for your question.
Thank you.
And then I want to give a big shout out to both Dr. Christine Wood as well as Tarina Whitfield. We would not have been able to put on this webinar without them, as well as just, the QEM network for providing this fellowship opportunity and this avenue for me to communicate with you all. Do have 4 more minutes left, and I'm happy to stay on and continue the discussion. I'm also happy to give folks a little bit of a breather maybe before your later appointments.
And as Emily mentioned, these QR codes will lead you to the QEM events page where you can look up upcoming webinars that might be of interest to you. That is updated frequently with new webinar content as it becomes available. The Heroes webpage, where you can find information on our QEM Heroes Fellows and their interests and topic areas and regions of service, and the webinar feedback form to give us feedback on today's webinar. Thank you so much for your participation today.
Also, if you think of a resource or have an idea related to the workshop afterwards, I would encourage you to put that in. I think I forget exactly how it's phrased, but the survey does have like something related to like additional thoughts or ways to, improve this, workshop. So please don't hesitate to share those resources in there as well.